Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel for a brand new mystery with Mollie. If you are new around here, if you've never seen my face on your screen before, then hi, my name is Mollie and I post true crime videos like this every single week. So if you think that is something that you might want to stick around for, then please do subscribe and don't forget to switch on the little notification bell so that YouTube will let you know whenever I post a new video. This week we are going to be talking about a solved case from Michigan when a teenage girl went out one summer's evening to walk her dog and never returned home. Quickly, those in her close circle rallied around and began a search for her. But tragically, they were soon informed that she had been found dead, having been the victim of a barbaric homicide. When a murder investigation was launched, one line of inquiry that detectives began delving into was the victim's digital footprint. They examined her mobile phone for any clues that could help them identify the perpetrator. And it was through doing this when the police realised that a fitness app that the victim had installed on her phone herself had actually captured her very last steps. It had captured the movements of her horrific murder, and by having this fitness app installed, she had unknowingly helped the police to solve this crime, to solve her own homicide. Join me as we delve into the harrowing case of April Millsap. But quickly, before we get into the case, please listen carefully to the following. This video is about the murder of a teenage girl, and it involves heavy themes such as attempted rape, sexual assault, paedophilia, and the topic of domestic abuse is also mentioned. Viewer discretion is advised. So for this week's case, we are going back over a decade now to the summer of 2014 in Armada, which is a tiny little village located in Macomb County in the state of Michigan in the US. And this is April Millsap. She was a 14-year-old girl who lived in Armada with her family. April was born on the 2nd of January 2000 to her parents Bobby and Jennifer Millsap, and she was their only child. She didn't have any siblings, but she did have a stepfather. His name was David, and he had been in April's life for a very long time. He got into a relationship with her mother Jennifer when April was just 6 years old, so she grew up with David really. And they were very, very close as stepfather and stepdaughter. April had that kind of relationship with her stepfather David and with her mother Jennifer really, where they were just cracking jokes all the time, always goofing around together, always making fun of each other. April's friends recalled how just funny it would be to be in the Millsap house and witness the banter, I suppose, between April and her parents. And April was just idolised by her family. Jennifer said that she didn't realise how much she was missing until the day that April was born. It was like April just completed her, and she described her daughter as being the quote, sunshine in her life. As soon as April walked into a room, it just lit up. April was a student at the Armada High School where she had a lot of friends. She had a good circle of friends, and they described her as being very sweet and loud and a bit crazy at times. They said that April was always very creative. She loved art and drawing. She loved playing around with makeup and putting together different outfits, very kind of stereotypical girly things like that, I suppose. She loved hanging out with her friends, but equally she also enjoyed having her alone time at home too. She loved just winding down and recharging, which I can definitely relate to. April also had a boyfriend. His name was Austin. He was 15 years old, so only a year older than April, and they went to school together. They'd been together for about a year or so they were kind of like high school sweethearts, I guess. And yeah, at 14 years old, April Millsap was living a pretty normal, happy life for a teenage girl living in Armada, and the Millsap family felt very happy and settled in Armada. As I mentioned earlier, it was a very, very tiny village. In 2014, it had a population of only about 1,700 people, so it was definitely one of those areas where everyone knew everyone was very friendly with each other, and it always felt so safe and so secure. Definitely not the kind of place where you would expect a crime as horrific as this one to occur. So let's get into the day that this case took place. It was the 24th of July 2014. It was the middle of summer, and therefore it was the summer break, the summer holidays, meaning that April was off school. And that Thursday in July started off as a pretty normal day. April had a bit of a lie-in. Her mother Jennifer said that she didn't wake up until about midday. Obviously she didn't need to be up for school or anything, so she could sleep in. After she woke up, she spent the afternoon just kind of chilling in her bedroom on her computer, chatting to her friends as teenagers do. And then when it got to around 5:45 p.m, April decided to go on a walk with her beloved dog Penny. Penny was was a border collie. She had been with the Millsap family for a number of years, I think, and April just doted on her. Her stepfather David said that Penny was, I guess, a family dog, but really she was just April's dog. April would be the one to take her on her walks. She would take her to see her friends and her boyfriend Austin. Penny was basically April's little follower. She would follow April around wherever she went. So yeah, April grabbed Penny's lead, and at 5:45 p.m. they headed out the door for their walk. They headed to one of their regular walking routes, which was along the Macomb Orchard Trail in Armada, and Jennifer Millsap was expecting her daughter to be home within maybe an hour or so. However, as it would turn out, April never actually returned. She never came back from her walk with Penny. About an hour and a half passed by since April left, and her mother Jennifer realised that April wasn't home, which she thought was strange. I mean, she didn't really think too much into it at first. She thought that perhaps April had taken Penny to go and see a friend, or maybe her boyfriend Austin, because as I said, that was something that she did fairly often, so she just assumed that that was where she had gone. But time continued to pass. Jennifer was just waiting and waiting for April to walk through the door, but she never did. And she also wasn't responding to her mother's calls or texts. Jennifer started texting her saying, "Where are you? Call me," but she never got a response. And all of her calls were just going to voicemail. So it was following this when Jennifer decided to reach out to April's boyfriend Austin. She called him asking if he was with April, but he wasn't. He said that he hadn't heard from her. And so, as you can imagine, it was at this point when panic started to set in for Jennifer. Hours had gone by and she couldn't understand why April wasn't back, and also why she wasn't answering her phone. I mean, she was a teenage girl. She was normally glued to her phone. So Jennifer was just getting more and more worried, and then all of a sudden, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't April, but it was her boyfriend Austin, and also a friend of his that he'd been out with that evening. As I mentioned, Jennifer had spoken to Austin on the phone, and he said that he hadn't heard from April. However, now there was a development. He told Jennifer that April had actually sent a text to his phone at around 6:28 p.m. So about 45 minutes, half an hour after she left the house with Penny. She sent this text at 6:28, but Austin said that he didn't actually get it until about an hour later because he didn't have any phone signal until then. And this text was very, very alarming. It read, quote, "I think I almost got kidnapped, OMFG." And that text was the last that April Millsap sent. After sending this text to Austin about almost being kidnapped, no one ever heard from her again. Following this, Jennifer immediately called her partner, April's stepfather David, at work. She told him that April was missing, so David left work instantly, and alongside April's boyfriend Austin and Austin's friend, they all headed to the Macomb Orchard Trail, which, as we know, is where April went to walk with Penny that afternoon. And they just began searching for her. They split up and all went in different directions, just desperately hoping that one of them would find her and Penny. However, what they would eventually find out is that by this point, April already had been found on the trail when two members of the public made a heartbreaking discovery. A young couple, a man and a woman, were jogging along one area of the trail when at around 8:20 p.m. they came across a dog. It was wearing a lead, but there was no one holding it. This dog was just on its own. So the couple approached the dog, and apparently it was just acting very shaky and very frantic, and it started kind of leading the couple to this thick brush area of the trail towards a ravine. And it was there where they noticed the body of a young girl lying in a ditch. I'm sure that you've probably pieced it together by now, but this dog was Penny, and Penny had led this couple to the body of her owner, 14-year-old April Millsap. April had been horrifically murdered on the trail. So the couple called 911 to report this discovery, and police rushed straight to the scene. And actually, immediately, the Michigan State Police were called in, because I've touched on this already, but the village of Armada was so small and thought to be so safe. Crime rates were extremely low, that the Armada Police Department itself was so small too. In fact, according to reports, they only had literally two full-time police officers in the Armada Police Department. And the village of Armada hadn't seen a murder occur in their area for decades. So as soon as this awful discovery was reported to them, they had to call in the Michigan State Police for help with this investigation, this homicide investigation, because the Armada police just weren't equipped to deal with a crime like this on their own. So police arrived at the scene. They observed April's body. As I said, she was in this thick wooded area of the trail that was quite difficult to get to, actually. She was lying on her back, and I think immediately the police could tell that this crime was sexually motivated just from looking at her body. April was kind of partially clothed. Her top and her bra had been pulled down, her shorts and her underwear had been pulled down, her shoes were off of her feet and were found nearby. As I understand it, April hadn't been raped by her attacker, but it certainly looked like that was the aim here. It looked like they had tried to rape her, tried to sexually assault her, but their attempt at doing so failed, and so they just killed her. And my God, was the way she was killed just horrific. April had injuries pretty much all over her body. She was just covered in bruises from where she had very clearly been beaten. According to one report I came across, later in her autopsy, the medical examiner noted 48 separate injuries to her body, the majority of which were around her face and neck area. She had blood all over her face and in her hair, and it was eventually established that her cause of death was, quote, blunt head trauma and asphyxia due to neck compression. April had been viciously beaten around the head, but not just beaten, actually. Sickeningly, it was determined that April had actually been stomped on by her killer. They literally stomped on her face and neck. In fact, she was stomped on so viciously and with so much force that she literally had shoe prints on her face. She had these patterns on her face and neck which were consistent with a shoe tread. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? For someone to do that, to stomp on an innocent 14-year-old girl's face, it's just pure evil. And I cannot even begin to comprehend the terror that April experienced in her final moments. Well, I say moments, but actually the medical examiner also established that this attack on April probably lasted for over 10 minutes. 10 minutes of pure fear and agony. It's horrifying. Now, of course, upon arriving at the scene, the detectives had no idea who this victim was initially. They didn't know yet that it was April Millsap. However, if you recall from earlier, April's mother Jennifer and her boyfriend Austin and Austin's friend headed to the trail to look for her when she didn't return home from her walk. Now, by this time, April's body had been found and police were at the scene, and Jennifer noticed all of this police activity on the trail. So she approached the officers, she told them that her daughter was missing, and as soon as Jennifer described the clothes that April was wearing when she left the house that afternoon, the police just knew that April was the murder victim that had just been found, as the clothes that Jennifer described matched the clothes that the victim was wearing. And so Jennifer was taken to the police station, and tragically she was informed that a body had been found on the trail and that the police believed that it was April, her teenage daughter, her only child, had been brutally murdered. Of course, the police did have to look into April's family as potential suspects right in the very beginning, just in case there was a chance that they could have been involved in what had happened to her, but obviously they weren't. Her parents were ruled out, and they also started looking into April's boyfriend Austin. They looked at Austin quite heavily, actually, and the detectives were fairly suspicious of him in the beginning for a couple of reasons. Number one, Austin did actually inform them when he was interviewed that his and April's relationship was kind of on the rocks at the time that this case occurred. Apparently they'd very recently had an argument. I don't know exactly what it was about, but yeah, they weren't in the best place at the time of April's murder. So does that indicate that he could have had a motive for wanting her dead? Possibly. But another reason as to why the detectives were a tad suspicious of Austin was because of that text that April April sent to him about almost being kidnapped. Specifically, the fact that he didn't actually reply to it. His girlfriend had sent him a message in which she was clearly nervous and scared because she thought that someone had just tried to abduct her, and he just never responded. And I don't know, to the detectives, that was just a bit strange. It kind of made alarm bells ring. And so they asked him about this in his interview. They asked him why he didn't reply, and apparently Austin just said that, to be honest, he thought that April was just joking or that she was exaggerating. He didn't think that it was as serious as it clearly was. So because they were so skeptical of Austin, the police asked him for his account on the afternoon/evening that April was killed. They asked him for his movements so that they could work out whether he could have had opportunity to commit this crime. And he said that he was out with his friend. He actually helped his friend with picking up a television. So they went and did that at around 4, half 4 that afternoon. And then Austin said that following this, they went to a local McDonald's and got some food before going back to his house. And then obviously it was later that night when Austin was contacted by April Millsap regarding April being missing. So the police began looking into this, and they were able to obtain CCTV footage from that McDonald's that Austin said he'd been to, and sure enough, he was there. The police were able to see him and his friend pull into the McDonald's drive-thru at 6:31 p.m. that evening. So just a couple of minutes after April sent the kidnap text, proving that he couldn't have been the killer because he was nowhere near the trail at the time that it's believed April was attacked. 15-year-old Austin had been ruled out as a suspect. Meanwhile, as all of this was going on, as police were interviewing and taking statements from the people in April's life, searches also began for April's mobile phone. You see, it wasn't found on or near her body in that ditch, meaning that the killer must have taken it away with them and possibly ditched it elsewhere. And so a thorough search of the trail quickly began to try and find it. They even brought in sniffer dogs to assist with the search, and the FBI actually. They were asked to assist with this investigation too, and thankfully their efforts paid off. I believe it was just the day after April was murdered when the phone was found by sniffer dogs in an area about half a mile away from where her body was found. So the phone was collected and sent off to the crime lab to be examined further to see what evidence they could find on it. By this point, by the time April's phone was found, word of April's murder had already rapidly spread around Armada, which of course, as you can imagine, was just devastating. Devastating not only for April's family, but the whole community really. As I mentioned earlier, Armada was one of those villages where everyone knew everyone, a very tight-knit area. So the fact that one of their own had been brutally murdered, the fact that a child had been murdered, it was heartbreaking for the locals. They were so angry and also terrified. The whole community just lived in fear in the aftermath of her murder because they knew that there was a killer on the loose, possibly living amongst them. What once felt like such a safe and friendly little village was now the complete opposite. People were scared to leave their own homes. So the police knew that they were under a hell of a lot of pressure here to catch the perpetrator, and fast, before he potentially struck again. So they continued looking into the men in April's life. They looked into the boys that she went to school with. There was this one guy from April's school in particular, his name was Roger, and he was looked at quite closely as a potential suspect, but was ultimately ruled out. And as well as this, the police were also conducting door-to-door inquiries, asking the residents who lived close to the trail if they had seen or heard anything, or if they had any information that could have possibly been related to this case. And there was one resident in particular who provided some very interesting information. It was a young girl, and she said that at around 6 p.m. on the evening that April was killed, she was in her house just looking out of her window when all of a sudden she saw this white van driving incredibly slowly down her road. I believe the young girl said that there were 2 men in this van. Obviously one of them was driving, the other was in the passenger seat, and she claimed that as they were driving past, both of them just stared at her and pointed at her house, which understandably made her feel very nervous and uneasy. And when she heard about the murder of April Millsap, she decided to report this incident to the detectives just in case it could have been relevant. Could those 2 men have been responsible for her murder, and they were out driving around in this van that evening looking for a victim? Is that why they were pointing at the young girl in the window? They thought that she could have been a potential victim. The police really thought that this lead about the white van van could have been the key to solving April's case, and so they quickly appealed to the public regarding it. They told them that they were looking for this specific van, and as a result they received a number of tips and calls. However, ultimately one of them would actually rule this white van theory out of the case. You see, a man came forward to the police and said, actually, that was me and my co-worker. We were the ones who drove down that street and pointed to that young girl's house, and he said that the reason they did that was because they worked as contractors and he was pointing out the houses that he had previously worked on to his co-worker. That was all. And this was confirmed to be genuine. These men had nothing to do with April's death. So yeah, it seemed like the white van was in fact not related to this investigation after all. However, it wasn't long before the police received even more leads about another type of vehicle. Just a couple of days after April's murder, the police started to receive tips about a motorbike. Basically, a man, a member of the public, was on the trail that evening with his 2 children, and they remembered seeing April. Actually, they saw a young girl matching April's description walking a dog along the trail at around 6:30 p.m. However, she wasn't actually alone. Walking besides April and talking to her was an older man with a motorbike. He was kind of walking alongside her, pushing his motorbike, and he and April were chatting. Of course, this man and his children didn't think much of this at the time, but they did tell the police that this interaction between April and this man on the motorbike didn't necessarily seem very friendly. It didn't seem like they really knew each other, I guess, from how they were walking and talking. I mean, April didn't appear to be uncomfortable or scared, but I don't know, it just didn't seem like they were chatting as if they were friends or acquaintances. It did seem like they were strangers, I suppose. Now, as I said, this was around 6:30 p.m, around the same time that April sent that text to her boyfriend Austin about almost being kidnapped. So although April didn't look scared during this interaction with the man on the motorbike, clearly she was to have sent that message. The police now believed that this man with the motorbike seen with April was their top suspect. And the police also received information from other people who were on the trail that evening, and they also described seeing a man on a motorbike. I think he kind of stood out to a lot of people because according to one source, motorbikes weren't actually allowed on the Bacombe Orchard Trail. The witnesses described the man as being in his 30s. He was tall, he had, quote, piercing eyes, and as well as his motorbike, he also had a helmet. And this composite sketch of the individual was created and released to the public. The witnesses also described the motorbike as being blue and white in colour, and they said that it was a modified street legal dirt bike. So now the police had this new line of inquiry. Now they were determined to try and find this motorbike and the person who owned it. So all of the officers working on the case were told to keep an eye out for it. Keep an eye out for a motorbike matching this description. And as luck would have it, just 3 days after April was killed on the 27th of April 2014, one officer informed detectives that he thought he'd found it. He'd found the motorbike. Officer Raymond Peckman was actually on his way home from work. He was driving through Armada when all of a sudden something caught his eye. It was, of course, a motorbike, a blue and white motorbike, just like the one that witnesses described seeing in this case, and it was just parked in the driveway of this house in Armada. And so Officer Peckman immediately pulled over, he got out his phone and he took a picture of this motorbike, and then he showed this picture to the detectives, and sure enough, the detectives agreed. They said, yeah, it looks exactly like the bike that the witnesses described. And so I believe what happened next is the police went to speak with the people who lived in this house that the bike was parked outside of, and the homeowner said, actually, the bike's not mine, it belongs to my friend, 32-year-old James Van Callis, and he lived in an area called Wales Township in Michigan, which I think is like 18 miles away from Armada. So on the 28th of July 2014, the police decided to pay a visit to this James Van Callis. They went to his house and asked him some questions regarding his motorbike and his movements on the night that April Millsap was killed. And he seemed to be pretty cooperative with the police initially. He was willing to answer questions. He claimed that he was at his brother's house in Armada on the evening in question, which his brother confirmed, although, to be honest, this wasn't really the strongest alibi for the detectives, understandably. understandably, because, you know, his brother could have just lied for him. They also asked James what kind of shoes he was wearing on the evening of the 24th, and he showed them this white pair of trainers that he had, which didn't seem to match. They didn't have the same kind of shoe tread as the impressions left on April's face and neck. So the police didn't necessarily have any solid evidence linking James Van Callis to the crime, but obviously they did have the fact that his motorbike matched the description of the bike that witnesses saw on the trail with April. And also, if you compare a picture of James Van Callis to the composite sketch, you can't deny that they do look pretty damn similar. So the police were still pretty suspicious of him, and they began looking at him closely as a potential suspect. So they started just trying to find out a bit more about him. Now, they discovered that he did have a criminal record, not necessarily for very violent crimes, but apparently he'd been arrested and charged with breaking and entering, and also for failing to pay child support. He was a father, and this was in 2005 and 2006. So yeah, they were the only things on his rap sheet, really. However, upon looking further into James Van Callis's family, the police did discover that his father's criminal record was much more disturbing. Now, James did still live with his father at this point in time, and he was also called James, so he was James Van Callis Sr., and he was a registered sex offender. He was convicted of criminal sexual conduct with a minor, with a child under the age of 13. So could this be a case of like father, like son? We know that James Van Callis Sr. clearly had an interest, a sexual interest in young people, in children. So did James Van Callis Jr. share these same disturbing fantasies? And so he went to the trail that day on his motorbike looking for a young girl that he could sexually abuse. So because of their suspicions, the police conducted a search of the Van Callis' home, during which they actually found a hell of a lot of marijuana plants that James Jr. and Sr. had been growing and I think selling. So they were actually both arrested for this, arrested on drug charges, which was a relief for the detectives because, as I said, James Jr. definitely was a suspect in the investigation by this point. So at least they now had peace of mind knowing that if he was the killer, he was behind bars for the drug charges for the time being whilst they continued with the investigation. They had peace of mind knowing that he couldn't hurt anyone else. Now, unfortunately, they didn't find anything in the house directly linking James Van Callis to April's murder. They did have a look at all of his shoes and none of them seemed to match the shoe tread evidence. They DNA tested his motorbike and his motorbike helmet to see if they could find any of April's DNA on it, her blood, but they didn't find anything. I mean, to be honest, from just looking at the house, the detectives and the forensic team could tell that it had very recently been thoroughly cleaned, as had the motorbike, I think. So was that in an attempt to destroy evidence? Well, the police soon received information from someone in James's life which seemed to corroborate this theory. You see, after James Jr. was arrested, his girlfriend Crystal actually came forward to the police, and guess what she told them? Crystal was very nervous and upset, and she told the police that on the night that April Millsap was murdered, James had been out on his motorbike, and when he returned to the house, she walked in on him literally scrubbing and meticulously cleaning both his shoes and his motorbike helmet with hand sanitizer. Now, according to one report, James told Crystal at the time that he was cleaning oil off of his shoes, but she didn't believe him, I don't think. She just thought it was so bizarre that he was cleaning them with hand sanitizer, of all things. So the police asked Crystal, well, what kind of shoes was he cleaning? What shoes did he wear that night? And she said that they were these black and white Air Jordan trainers, which was interesting to learn because when police first spoke to James Van Callis, he claimed that the shoes he was wearing on the night that this case occurred were actually white trainers, which, as we know, didn't match the shoe marks left on April's body by the killer. But now, through speaking to Crystal, it became clear that he had lied, and Crystal said that after that night, she never saw those shoes again. He must have gotten rid of them, and the police never found them during their search warrant. But we'll come back to the shoes in a second. First, I just want to tell you some more about what Crystal had to tell the police. So she also described to them about how her boyfriend James Van Callis was very abusive towards her. In fact, she even described how she essentially felt like his hostage. She said that he was so controlling, he would hardly ever let her leave the house. In addition to to that, Crystal also spoke some more about James's demeanour on the night of April's death. She told the detectives that after she saw him cleaning his shoes and his helmet, he just started saying some really weird things to her. Apparently he said to Crystal that he had, quote, messed up and that he needed her to stand by him, which of course she thought was really strange. And it wasn't until later, when she heard about April's death and after James had been arrested, it wasn't until then that she realised that these comments he made about messing up that evening were probably in reference to April's murder. So everything really was starting to piece together here for the police. Their case against James Van Callis was starting to build. Now, going back to the shoes, as I said, Crystal claimed that the shoes James was cleaning that night were a pair of black and white Air Jordan trainers, which were never found. However, something that the police did find after searching through James's social media accounts, like his Facebook, was a picture that he had posted himself in which he was wearing these shoes, these Air Jordans. He had posted this picture the year before in 2013. In addition to that, after searching Van Callis's mobile phone, they found a video on it that he had recorded in which his shoes, the Air Jordans, were captured once again. So what the police decided to do, because they didn't have the actual shoes, as I said, it was clear that Van Callis had disposed of them after the murder. So what they decided to do was order a pair of this exact type of shoe, the Air Jordans, and compare the tread on them to the stomp marks left on April's body. And sure enough, they matched. They were an exact match. April had been stomped on by someone wearing the exact same shoes as James Van Callis's shoes. So that was some more circumstantial evidence against James Van Callis Jr. And luckily the evidence didn't stop there. They also took a look into his internet search history and found that he had made some very disturbing Google searches. He'd Googled things like, quote, do girls like older men, and how to have sex with a girl, how to attract younger women, why do younger girls become interested in older men. They also found videos on his mobile phone that Van Callis had recorded himself of teenage girls. He had been secretly recording them without their knowledge whilst they were just like walking down the street, I think, girls that he didn't even know. So it was abundantly clear that just like his father, he was also sexually attracted to teenage girls, to children. But during the investigation, James Van Callis's devices weren't the only ones being searched for evidence. So was April's. As we know, her phone was found about half a mile away from where her body was on the trail, and it was sent to the FBI to be examined. And it was through examining April's phone that the police really kind of had their breakthrough in this case, as they realised that April actually had a fitness app installed on her phone. And in fact, this app had traced her steps during her murder. And not just her steps, but this app also tracked the speed at which she was walking, which just that in itself was very, very telling for the investigators. So let's delve into that. So when April started her walk with Penny that evening, the app showed detectives that she was walking at a speed of about 2.2 miles per hour. That was her average, which is pretty normal, a pretty normal walking pace. However, shortly after 6:20 p.m, so not long before she sent that text message to Austin about almost being kidnapped, they were able to see that her speed picked up all of a sudden. It practically doubled, as if, you know, she was trying to get away from something or someone. So police now believed that that was probably when James Van Callis first approached April on his motorbike and tried to talk to her, and clearly she was very on edge. The app also showed that as she picked up her pace, she also turned around as if she had suddenly decided to make her way home, again suggesting that she was scared and that she just wanted to get home. However, as we know, she never made it home, and after sending that "I almost got kidnapped" text, the fitness app picked up about 10 to 15 minutes of very, very frantic activity. The movement of April's phone for this 15 minutes were described as being very jerky and just kind of all over the place. She was moving all over the path, in and out of the woods, and it was clear that this was the attack taking place. These jerky, frantic movements were of April fighting with her attacker, fighting for her life. This was a violent struggle. And then when this violent struggle, this frantic activity on the phone stopped, the fitness app showed the phone leaving the scene where April's body was left and going up the path of the trail at a speed of 17 17 to 19 miles per hour, the speed of a motorbike, the killer had unknowingly shown the police his exact escape route from the crime scene because they stole April's phone after they killed her and took it away with them. After leaving the Macomb Orchard Trail, the fitness app showed the police the roads that the killer started driving or biking along, and the police were able to check one of the CCTV cameras that was along this route, and sure enough, at the same time that the app recorded the phone going along this road, the CCTV camera captured a motorbike driving by. A motorbike that looked exactly like James Van Callis's motorbike, exactly like the bike that the witnesses described seeing on the trail. And it was following the discovery of all of this evidence when the police decided that they were going to go ahead and arrest and charge 32-year-old James Van Callis Jr. with the murder of 14-year-old April Millsap. Now, this was a risky move, I suppose, because yes, they had collected a lot of evidence against him by this point, from the motorbike to the composite sketch, the trainers, the statements from his girlfriend, the witnesses who saw him on the trail, the Google searches, the videos on his phone, the fitness app tracker. They had a lot of evidence, but it was mostly circumstantial. The police didn't have any DNA evidence against James Van Callis whatsoever because, well, I mean, clearly he'd made a great effort to get rid of any DNA evidence from cleaning his helmet and disposing of his trainers, etc. And the police knew full well that that would be the defense's argument in court, that Van Callis couldn't have been the killer because there was no DNA proving it. So yeah, it was a bit of a risk to charge him, but it was a risk that the police were willing to take. They believed that although the majority, if not all of their evidence was circumstantial, they still had enough of it to definitively prove to the jury that James Van Callis was responsible for this horrific crime. And so in October of 2014, 3 months after this case took place, James Van Callis was charged with April's murder and he went to trial in early 2016. It was the prosecution's case, their theory, that James Van Callis carried out this crime simply because April rejected him. As we know from his Google searches and videos on his phone, he clearly had an interest, a sexual interest in young teenage girls, and so it's been theorized that after seeing 14-year-old April on the trail that evening walking Penny, he decided to approach her and probably try to come on to her, try to engage in sexual activity with her. But April said no, she rejected him and she started walking away from James Van Callis quickly. And she was obviously so spooked by this encounter that she texted her boyfriend Austin saying, quote, "I think I almost got kidnapped, OMFG." And this angered James Van Callis. He was so furious that April had turned him down. He couldn't take no for an answer. And so he decided to run after her and attack her. A violent struggle ensued between them. April tried desperately hard to get away and escape with her life. But I mean, really, she stood no chance, did she? She was a tiny, petite 14-year-old girl. There was no way that she was going to be able to defend herself against this 6-foot, strongly built man. As we discussed earlier, April's clothing was kind of in disarray when she was found. Her bra had been pulled down, her underwear had been pulled down, indicating that Van Callis had tried to sexually assault her. And as the struggle continued, he proceeded to beat April to death. He stomped and stomped and stomped on her neck and face a number of times until she was dead. And then he fled the scene with both her mobile phone and her backpack, I believe, both of which he later ditched. And April's body was obviously found a few hours later after her dog Penny led those two joggers to the crime scene. And then after the crime, Van Callis tried to cover it up. He claimed that he was at his brother's house at the time of the murder. He cleaned his home and his motorbike and helmet and shoes, and then he just continued with his life as normal. That was the prosecution's case during the trial, and as expected, the defense tried to argue that the lack of DNA evidence in this case meant that James was innocent. He couldn't have been the perpetrator. But as it would turn out, the lack of DNA evidence wasn't enough to sway the jury, and at the end of his trial, James Van Callis was found guilty of the murder of April Millsap. And not just of her murder, he was also found guilty of kidnap and attempted sexual assault too. And his sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole, and so prison is where he remains to this day, thank goodness. At Van Callis's sentencing, April's mother Jennifer gave a victim impact statement, and I have a couple of quotes from it here to share with you. She said, "What did April ever do to you for you to be so brutal with her? Did you even know her? What was your plan for her that night? Why did you have to hurt her? Just because she ignored your advances, she deserved to die? You stole her chance to experience being a wife and mother. You took from us the joy of seeing her grow. I will never get to see her graduate, go to high school and college. I know that the Bible tells us that we are supposed to forgive those who wronged you, but what you took from us is unforgivable. I pity you and I hate you and I could never forgive you." Now, many of James Van Callis's family members protested his innocence, including his mother. She was adamant that he was innocent and that her son had been framed for this murder by the police. And James Van Callis himself did immediately try to appeal against his conviction. However, he was unsuccessful. This appeal was rejected, and as I said, he remains in prison. In the aftermath of April's murder, a beautiful memorial garden was built for her on the Macomb Orchard Trail in Armada, and I'll share some pictures of it on screen. It really is a lovely little area for April's loved ones and her friends and the community to go to remember her and celebrate her life. There are so many beautiful flowers planted for April. There's a bench, and there is even a statue which was made to look like her dog Penny, who, as we know, April absolutely adored. And that is it for this case. That concludes the case of April Millsap. I've said it a few times already in this video, but a devastating case. 14 years old. April was barely even a teenager, and her life was cruelly taken away by a sexual predator. It's harrowing. But yeah, that is it for this case. As always, please do let me know your thoughts and opinions on the case down below in the comments. I would love to hear what you guys think. Also, feel free to let me know of any other cases you would like to see me cover on this channel. Again, you can pop them down below in the comments, or alternatively, you can go through my case request form, which is linked in the description box. Thank you all so much for watching and supporting each week. Please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again next week for another mystery with Mollie. Bye.